We all love a good story about someone who just refuses to give up, right? But what if our obsession with grit is, well, actually holding us back? Today, we're going to tear down this popular idea to find a much smarter way to think about perseverance. So first up, let's talk about a word that has just taken over schools, businesses, and pretty much the entire self-help world: grit. It's become this go-to answer for why some people make it and others don't. The psychologist Angela Duckworth defined it as this powerful mix of passion and perseverance. And it's been sold to us as the secret sauce for success, the one thing that separates the good from the truly great.
And man, its influence has been huge. I mean, the idea is so simple and catchy, it's been adopted pretty much everywhere. It shaped how a whole generation thinks about achievement. But does it actually hold up?
Because here's the thing, when you take a huge cultural idea like grit and you put it under a scientific microscope, well, the story starts to get a little shaky. Some pretty big cracks start to show up in the foundation.
Yeah, so in the last few years, a whole body of research has started to push back on the big claims about grit. We're talking about at least 5 peer-reviewed studies that have found some really fundamental problems with the whole theory.
And these criticisms are all over the map. For starters, researchers are saying the way we measure grit is flawed. Some argue it's basically just a new, trendy name for an old personality trait we've known about forever: conscientiousness. But here's the real kicker. They found that when you split grit into its 2 parts, perseverance by itself is actually a better predictor of academic success than perseverance plus passion. Kind of weird, right? And this slide right here really shows you just how weak that connection to academic success is. When researchers put grit head-to-head with other factors, they found that something called self-efficacy, which is really just your own confidence that you can do something, is a way, way stronger predictor of a student's grades. It's not even close. Okay, so with all these critiques, does that mean the whole idea of grit is just wrong? Well, not so fast. Angela Duckworth, the person who came up with the theory, actually says the problem isn't the concept itself. The problem is that it's been totally misunderstood and misapplied by, well, almost everyone. See, Duckworth argues that when critics are laser-focused on things like school grades, they're completely missing the point. She says she never meant for grit to be about, acing your algebra test. For her, grit is about something much, much bigger. And this slide just nails the disconnect perfectly. On the left, you've got where schools are trying to shove the idea of grit in: report cards and test scores. But look at the right. That's where her original research was. We're talking about these extraordinary, super long-term, passion-driven challenges, like getting through West Point's insane training or winning the National Spelling Bee. Totally different worlds. So the most important point here is that the way grit is being used out in the wild has drifted so far from the original idea. The thought of schools holding a grit pep rally to pump up test scores? In her own words, that's just not a good idea. All right, so if the modern, popular version of grit is kind of a mess, what's the alternative? I mean, how should we be thinking about perseverance? Well, to get a better handle on it, we can actually look back to some ancient wisdom. And for this, we're going to turn to the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. He came up with this really powerful idea he called the mean. And it's all about finding that virtuous, effective, sweet spot right in the middle of 2 unhealthy extremes. Now, when you apply this idea to perseverance, you start to see that it's not about being gritty 24/7. On one side, you have the deficiency. That's giving up too easily, right? Bailing on something the second it gets hard. But on the other side, you have the excess, and that's being foolishly stubborn, sticking to a sinking ship long after you should have jumped. The real wisdom is finding that perfect balance right in between. And Aristotle actually gave us a little guide for how to find it. First, just know what the 2 extremes are. Then, if you're not sure what to do, try to lean away from the one that's more dangerous. And let's be honest, stubbornness can often cost you a lot more than quitting. And maybe most importantly, know yourself. If you know you tend to give up easily, practice pushing just a little bit harder. But if you're a naturally stubborn person, maybe practice the art of letting things go. You see how this ancient wisdom just totally reframes the entire conversation? It shifts the goal away from just endless persistence to intelligent persistence. So the big takeaway here isn't to just blindly be gritty, no matter the cost. It's about cultivating the wisdom to know when to push through, how to change your approach, and this is the really crucial part, when the smartest and frankly the strongest thing you can do is to stop. The philosopher Michel de Montaigne said it so well centuries ago. He knew that sometimes just grinding away relentlessly is the absolute worst thing you can do. Sometimes you need the wisdom to take a step back, to find a lighter touch, or maybe even to quit altogether.
And that really just leaves us with one final question for you to think about. In your own life, your projects, your career, your goals, where is that line between perseverance and just plain stubbornness? Figuring out your own answer to that question, that's the first step to a much wiser and way more effective way of getting what you want.